idea that they're trying to really break down and talk to different demographics. You know, for example, the Howard Stern interview is for probably more a bit of an older audience. The Call Your Daddy audience is relatively younger women, and Howard Stern, sort of to counterpoint that, is more male orientated. And so that's what they're saying. The problem is that I think that that means that she has to do a lot more of it if she's sort of really sort of slicing and dicing the population. It's sort of a heavier lift for her in terms of strategy.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by White House reporter Naomi Lim. Naomi, there's had been all this criticism of Vice President Harris for not doing enough interviews. Now she's sort of doing the opposite of that. She's on a little bit of a media blitz. How has it gone so far?
Well, I think we're learning why the Harris campaign didn't want the vice president to be doing interviews. I think that's the main learning that we've got from this week. Essentially, from the time that she got the nomination, she's been really cloistered. They've been really sort of self-selecting or sort of curating the ones of the outlets that she speaks to tends to be sort of friendlier media. For example, I think the first interview she gave post-convention was with a TikToker. And then after that, she sort of sat down for the first time with CNN, but it was a joint interview with Governor Tim Walz, this is her running mate, and people were she was criticized at that point because it was a way to maybe sort of shield her from questions or having someone as like a sidekick in case something went awry. What we've seen this week is sort of similar in a sense, where there have been friendlier outlets. For example, she sat down with the immensely popular Call Your Daddy podcast. Didn't face any sort of tough interview questions then. But then she did sit down with 60 Minutes, as well as The View, which you wouldn't have thought immediately as being sort of a tough interview place, but it was her response to a question about how she would differentiate herself from President Joe Biden that really sort of, I think, set social media alight, and the Trump campaign sort of pounced on it, not to use, I know that Republicans don't like when we say pounce.
To be pouncing, right.
But it was sort of really telling because basically she didn't have an answer, which one sort of leads to questions about staffing and how well she was prepared for a relatively predictable question. And secondly,
the central question of her campaign, really.
Exactly. She's supposed to be a change candidate, and here she is not even being able to sort of distinguish herself from her boss. I mean, that is the problem when you're a vice president running for president. You sort of have to embrace your boss, but also you have to be different at the same time, considering he has been so unpopular and struggled, and it was the reason why there was a pressure campaign mounted on him to stand aside anyway. And so for her to sort of struggle with that question was, I think, really telling, and for me was like the biggest takeaway from this media blitz that we've seen.
So other than 60 Minutes, she has still kind of focused on non-traditional sort of media sources and outlets for her interviews. I mean, Howard Stern obviously has been around a long time, but he's kind of a sympathetic guy to her. And, so is that part of it? And Trump is doing very similar things, going on podcasts and stuff like that. Is that a conscious strategy that they're employing, or? I
mean, the way that they argue, the reason behind this media strategy is that they want to be a lot more targeted. Their argument is that the traditional media is a lot more separated. We don't get those big audiences in as we did in the past. I mean, the debate might be a counterpoint to that, since sort of 60 million people watched it. But this idea that they're trying to really break down and talk to different demographics. For example, the Howard Stern interview is for probably more a bit of an older audience. The Call Your Daddy audience is relatively younger women, and Howard Stern, sort of to counterpoint that, is more male orientated. And so that's what they're saying. The problem is that I think that that means that she has to do a lot more of it if she's sort of really sort of slicing and dicing the population. It's sort of a heavier lift for her in terms of strategy, but they would argue that it's effective in terms of the millions of people that they can reach. Have
they explained why they've started doing more media interviews?
I think the idea is because she is sort of, her polls are stagnating. We came from this summer where her favorability skyrocketed. The polling was a lot more advantageous to her. And I think we're seeing as we get into the fall, with 1 month left into the election, the polls have really tightened. And one of the questions that respondents are asked by pollsters is sort of, do they have enough information about the vice president? Because she is like a known quantity, but there are so many things that we don't know about her at the same time. And I think people want to know more. And I think we're seeing the flip side of that is when, she gives these word salad answers, maybe it will put people that are undecided or not, confident in her ability to do the job or what she stands for. It gives them more sort of fodder to jump on that.
So is this what comes after Brat Summer?
Exactly.
Thank you, Naomi. You can read Naomi and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.